Ebusuafo mema mo akwa baade mo baye PhD TV aha ne yehwe aha ne etie aha ne tensema etwegu ewo my Ghana ase hinara ene nsema efa ye papa Honorable Kennedy akompreko Ohene Agyapong ho hina obenyan hina ewo ye PhD ase ya ane nsema ne etwegu eye po Adom Otchere wakasa good evening Ghana wakasa na nsema ne waka ye hina nutu ase eye coup d'etat de sisi ade West Africa had as a yaji tenia ankasa tese West Africa nkronkro ahodo ebere na coup d'etat ekoso ewa ha na po Adom Otchere akansem e de afa ho a ewo sura osuro efa eye Ghana ho ne eye other African countries ni hina enua dey can subscribe channel we for mame na video ya oba behwe bomodin na share na mo nunye bi nhwe no nte de ekoso ewo my Ghana ase like ai na comment na me hu wonsonso wagenkere ensema efaye papa Honorable Kennedy Ohene Agyapong ho nyina aheya na obenya ni nyina obenya nyina ewo ye PhD TV asia the man of the moment ai ono ena sisi Ghana ehia ono ene mampanyina obebe tena so a yinim se problem a eyo oman no efesi kese pa eye unemployment obetumi asolve efise oye businessman Oman bedi Ghana akonya no ai ono wade ne botom sika akreti employment bebre e de ama Ghana fo ye hina nim how osibi edo oman ne defa nti abre hina mu so okasa osi Ghana first Ghana first Ghana first Ghana first Ghana first no nye bibia ni hina ne se odo oman Ghana nti subscribe channel no no binya ne ho nsem hina e wa heya e dia meje so eye ankrato ebusu mo ye mbonwura nsem nom na nsem atwago de ajiweni ni na ne se oba eye West Africa ha de a tese eye Ghana ye neighboring countries ne de in fact coup d'etat koso ankasa yete wan yete Guinea yete timu a ene yete Burkina Faso ye ho no wan yete Mali yesa koda sore ya omosi Niger nsonso ebiesi ho no na se de na ekoso ECOWAS countries enoma ene ekoso ehwanum tese ku ekoso ankasa na nke ku de nke ye tese ye nyini ye ti ku de na se nke eye 80s mu hono no 80s 90s na nye 2000 ye wuramu ade ibe na so asesisi ade ku de ta no adoso ewo ye West Africa eguso tese ekoso ase ohwemu a the moment a coup d'etat ebe happen any country bia no timamufo no ani beje ebiti se fa Niger die ya ana no ya esi timamufo no de omuso mani age papa se ye coup d'etat aire esi ye soja aban ababere abetu eye aban na oteso no aire efiri so na sisi ade no democratic bia ewo sa akrom wono mo demom soja aban na aire atake over na po Adom Otchere akasa na abra oye na analysis no in fact ochiremu a eye ne hu papa se sansensemu ya etwegu ewo ye West Africa ebebetumi aire happen ewo ya manamana an ebo my Ghana hase ina Ghana ina akwa betumi aka ho bi because hwe de no mekoya ano odin ankasa in fact nsema po Adom Otchere de aka de moma ya yenko nyenkonko tie nsema po Adom Otchere eka eni hina.
The question is, has ECOWAS been embarrassed?
Well, I don't think so.
But the deadline came.
They made it very clear that diplomacy remains the first option, and the military option remains on the table as a last resort. So perhaps the extension is because there may be some understanding on certain issues, but not all. And for what happens behind the scenes, we are not privy to. But then there's this call for another summit on Thursday. That is when we have a clearer picture of what happened. Was it a total embarrassment? Was it that or some understanding we have gotten on certain issues and then the rest will have to be addressed? But so far, there was this attempt by AU to break the ice. It was like more a tripartite mission between ECOWAS, AU, and UN. Scheduled to have been in Niger today, but then was called off because the military junta perhaps whether refused to
open the airspace,
meet them or whatever. But
did they arrive in Niger? Do you know the envoys?
Per the statement here, it was aborted due to late communication from the military authorities indicate unavailability to receive the tripartite delegation. So it means they couldn't even set off.
Yeah.
The planned mission was part of the continued effort to peaceful resolution to the current crisis. But then,
That means the junta is feeling that they've won. They are feeling they won the first round.
it's like everyone has taken an entrenched position. So there's a need to break the ice. But then I'm very, very concerned about the need to bring external actors. I think for now, UN and the Western powers should just stay outside. It's an internal African affair. So if ECOWAS and the junta have taken an entrenched position, AU remains the best body to address the issue. This issue of really resorting to the Western powers or whatever to come in is something I don't really ascribe to.
Maybe it's for resources when you have to take an action. UN,
But
the African Union may go to UN. So if you give the UN the opportunity for the first-hand information.
Some of the root causes of these issues have to do with involvement of Western countries and some of their policies in Africa. So when you are bringing tainted faces to come to the table,
No,
and
they may not. The UN rep may be African. The UN does not mean the rep will be a Western person.
I'm not talking about UN precisely, but the issue of aside the UN, the involvement of Western powers, and sometimes sometimes what they do, they come in the guise of UN. And so even UN's neutrality has always been questioned over certain issues.
But then, you think the African Union carries more neutrality?
It is the best alternative.
In terms of neutrality?
Sure.
Who leads the African Union these days?
It seems like Mahama.
Okay.
But then this is
I've
just
President Mahama here.
That is just an old picture to give us. We almost had similar situation we had in the Gambia, but that was an issue of election and Yahya Jammeh refusing.
I think that was more straightforward.
Yeah, but then it was an issue that was resolved through military, participation.
But that also was unpopular. You see, the Yahya Jammeh situation, the context is that Yahya Jammeh's action was unpopular.
But then,
in terms of his U-turn of his acceptability of the results, his action was unpopular.
But
it was unpopular and undemocratic. Now, the coup, and when you are political science, we can talk legitimacy. Yeah. So, if you look at the concept of legitimacy, the coup has popular legitimacy. It's always very dangerous when an action doesn't have legal legitimacy, and it also doesn't even have political legitimacy, but it has popular legitimacy. So, Yahya Jammeh was unpopular. He didn't have popular legitimacy. He didn't have legal legitimacy. He didn't have political legitimacy.
No, but
so it was easy to get in and
but
take him out.
His argument also was within the context of the law. If we even go back to the Ivorian situation, Gbagbo's argument was within the context of the law. But just because the outside forces took an entrenched position, they failed to see. In Gbagbo's case, they said if you disagree, go to the Constitutional Court. He went, right? And the Constitutional Court annulled the election result, which is strictly legal. But because we have taken an entrenched position. But I'm only trying to refresh our memory backward. But then what we have now, so this is just preparation for the Thursday summit. But then we need to look at the form of diplomacy that took place. Whilst, on one hand, the Tuesday, there was a meeting of ECOWAS chiefs of defense staff. And this is the CDS of Nigeria, Christopher Musa, General Christopher Musa chaired the meeting. And then also, another delegation was sent to Niger. This is very significant because in this context...
The chief of staff go to Niger or they met in Abuja?
They met in Abuja, the ECOWAS chief of staff. But then, a delegation...
But that's not a good meeting. That's a belligerent sort of...
Yeah, but it was like diplomacy and then, what do you call it? Carrot and stick approach.
Okay.
So
gunboat
diplomacy, right. But then, another delegation was sent to Niger. That's a very significant one in terms of the membership. One, you have Abdulsalam Abubakar, who was equally a former military head of state in Nigeria, who took the army back to the barracks. And then you have the Sultan of Sokoto, he's equally an ex-soldier, and then the head of Nigerian Muslims. But if you understand his traditional influence, some of his domain stretch into Niger.
Oh, so one of the tribes in Niger respond to Sokoto?
Yeah, the Hausa ethnic groups, cut across.
The Kano side?
Nigeria's border with Niger is about 1,600 kilometers.
Yeah, very long.
Very long from Sokoto to Borno State. What I'm saying is that the traditional structure, there are some chiefs in Niger that answer to their overlords within the Nigerian side.
Oh, I see.
And that is what led to the agitation in the north. You see the Muslim clerics, the northern senators, everybody being very concerned because of the cultural affinity. And so sending him was equally...
So who sent him?
Tinubu. As ECOWAS chair. So this is a case where he was trying to use the traditional authority to also leverage influence. But then it also didn't lead to any breakthrough. And then on the Sunday, which happened to be the deadline of the ultimatum, we had this huge rally in the National Stadium in the capital, Niamey, and where the people were endorsing the coup. So this is now, you could now understand the standoff.
That's what I'm referring to as the popular legitimacy.
Sure.
They have demonstrated it, that they have popular legitimacy.
But the one thing we can't understand now is that, well, in a situation where there's a coup d'etat, you have the supporters of the coup d'etat having the chance to protest. Is the same courtesy extended to the opponent of the coup d'etat?
No, the point I'm making is that this popularity may not be verifiable. That there may be a greater silent population.
Sure, we can't tell for now. So it will be hard to really measure the level of popularity. And then if you look at the whole thing across the Sahel, it's not as if people are really in support of the military per se. It's just a reaction to the system. They are fed up with the French interference, the insecurity, and the failure of the politicians to meet the aspiration of the citizens. And so now we have back to the whether so far would it be a hard rejection, soft rejection? But then significantly, on Sunday, was it Sunday or Monday, there was this delegation from Burkina Faso and Mali that went to Niger, a solidarity visit. And here you have one of the members of the Malian junta, General Saido Kamara. He led the delegation from Mali that went to So you could see that now we have two divisions in ECOWAS. And these are the coups we have across board. These are outside West Africa. But these three are in West Africa. 2021 was in Mali. You have another coup in Burkina Faso. You have one in Guinea. And then the military makeup, we need to look at the military strength of the member states.
Of ECOWAS.
Yeah, of ECOWAS.
Take us through it.
So now, this is...
I can see Côte d'Ivoire is fair.
Benin has about 5,000 troops and 75.2 in dollar. That's the defense budget. And you could see that Côte d'Ivoire...
75, what do you mean?
The defense budget.
The percentage of
Percentage of GDP.
Or 75% of their GDP goes into military
defense budget, millions in dollars. Okay.
It's millions in dollars. So it was $75 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so these are, but then look at the figures, the numbers. You could see that if push comes to shove, the countries on the military will be outnumbered.
Okay.
Because if you look at
outspent.
Yeah, Côte d'Ivoire has 25,000 troops, Cape Verde 1,200, Ghana 14,000. This is an estimate.
But we're not committing all the 14,000.
No, but you see, your military strength will determine the number of troops you deploy.
Yes. But Ghana is already quite significantly deployed in Lebanon and in other places.
Yeah, even Nigeria is significantly overstretching the house.
Yeah, internally.
Internally. You have the army operating in about 25 states. Internal security operation. And you have this burgeoning, insurgency in the east, the IPOP.
Yeah.
And they need to break that mandate sitting. Tinubu has deployed troops. So
internally, the fact that you can see them here doesn't mean they'll be available for Niger.
But it could be surgical operation whereby you send special forces who are highly trained.
But let me ask you, I mean, you have looked at military a little bit. What then will be the focus of the military operation? To arrest? To do what? Because you come into Niger, this is a foreign territory. There's French operations that they are protecting minerals.
Yeah.
So they are not quite interested in politics. Then there's an American group also there. So if you are ECOWAS and you get in, what are you going to do?
So ideally, from outsider perspective, the main target would be the airport.
To do what with the airport?
The presidential villa.
To do what with it?
So when you capture the airport, you prevent the ability to use the Air Force. You also prevent them from escaping. Then you try to get the presidential palace, because you need to enforce an air blockade.
Why do you need the presidential palace for the air blockade?
Because they're holding the president in the presidential palace. You need to rescue Bazoum.
Oh yeah, that's going to be
bloody. But that's quite risky though.
But that's going to be bloody.
But then, beyond that, you also need to capture some strategic posts. Perhaps you besiege the army headquarters. It depends. So, on paper, the numbers seem to favor ECOWAS. But in reality, it's a very risky operation. And this is a division we now have in ECOWAS. It is the more prosperous coastal states under one form of democracy or the other, which is equally imperfect across board. And then the less prosperous landlocked countries under military rule.
Very interesting analysis. Very interesting.
So now...
So this is the rich South.
Yeah.
And they are all they are all thinking one way.
Yeah.
And the poor North
this one
is also thinking one way.
And then Niger, they recently gender free.
Yeah.
But then the question we need to ask ourselves is, how did we get to this point? Several issues.
Yeah.
One, we have poverty, we have insecurity across the region here. But then fundamentally, we currently have a shrinking democratic space. Because if you look at leaders using the third term policy to entrench their position, and if ECOWAS is fixated on all this military coup, and overlooking, because we're having a similar situation in Senegal today, but Macky Sall is trying to maneuver his way and come for a third term. And the opposition,
I think he's abandoned it also.
Well, he said so, but his action does not support it. Now, Sonko is now in jail. So there's a disconnect between rhetoric and action.
Okay.
And ECOWAS is still mute about that. So when if there's a military coup in Senegal and you come to tell them, hey, go back to democracy, you are being unfair. So in the Conde case, people were being killed on the street. ECOWAS stayed mute. When the coup d'etat occurred and people were jubilating, you're not telling them to go back. I mean, it becomes very, very difficult for people to accept ECOWAS. And ECOWAS, well, the credibility is at stake.
In the Mali situation and the Senegal situation?
Across board. ECOWAS has a deficit of trust at the moment. But this equally offers another important opportunity for ECOWAS to do deep soul searching. So we can have to approach here, a middle ground, whereby we can either do the soft approach, where you allow the coup to stand, but then within a period of time they must conduct election. But in that case, to avoid a situation in Mali where you have a counter coup by the same actor, in this case you can do what we did in Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. For stability reasons, to prevent coup d'etat, we had deployment of ECOWAS troops still in Guinea-Bissau. So we could come to a middle ground, the military coup stands, given a time period to conduct an election, and then to guarantee that there will be no counter coup after that period, then there will be some deployment of ECOWAS troops within, the country, but not an intervention militarily, or one that is just to guarantee that there is a return to democracy and But they also offered the Nigerians first an opportunity to do proper conference or conversation on the way forward. Because there's an issue of French influence across the Sahel, which on all from data and indication is very negative.
But that's what they've been trying to fight for so many years.
But that is what the French is also. And there's this argument I've seen people saying Nigeria and ECOWAS are doing the French bidding. The people don't understand history. Nigeria and France have always have loggerhead in West Africa. Nigeria sees itself as a bona fide leader in West Africa. And then the French are seen as undermining Nigeria's, influence.
Over their countries.